Imagine being so powerful that you literally changed your name to mean heaven's will. Imagine being so feared that even your own children trembled in your presence. And imagine being the only woman in over 4,000 years of Chinese history to rule as emperor. This is the story of Wu Zetian, a woman who climbed from being a lowly concubine to becoming the most powerful person in the world. But her path to the throne was paved with blood, betrayal, and ruthless decisions that would make even the most hardened rulers shiver. Today we're diving deep into the life of Wu Zetian, exploring how she broke every rule, destroyed every obstacle, and created an empire that lasted for decades. By the end of this video, you'll understand why historians still debate whether she was a brilliant leader or a monster in silk robes. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's travel back to 7th century China to meet the woman who redefined what it meant to hold power. Let's start at the beginning, in the year 624 AD. Wu Zetian wasn't born into royalty or even nobility. Her father was a timber merchant who got lucky during the political chaos of the time. When Wu was just 14 years old, something happened that would change her life forever. Emperor Taizong heard rumors about her beauty and intelligence. In those days, if an emperor wanted you in his palace, you had no choice in the matter. So young Wu left her family behind and entered the Forbidden City as a low-ranking concubine. Now here's where most stories of palace women would end in obscurity. But Wu was different from the very beginning. While other concubines focused on pleasing the emperor with their beauty, Wu focused on something far more valuable: knowledge. She learned to read and write at a time when most women were kept illiterate. She studied politics, military strategy, and court procedures. She watched, she listened, and most importantly, she planned. When Emperor Taizong died in 649 AD, Wu faced her first major crisis. According to tradition, all of his concubines who hadn't given him children were supposed to become Buddhist nuns. This meant a life of isolation and poverty. But Wu had already made connections that would save her. Prince Li Ji, who was about to become Emperor Gaozong, had noticed Wu during his visits to his father's court. Some historians believe they had already begun a secret relationship while his father was still alive. This was incredibly dangerous because relationships between a father's concubines and his sons were considered among the worst possible crimes. But Wu was willing to take that risk. When Gaozong became emperor, he broke tradition and brought Wu back to the palace. This decision would ultimately cost him his power and change Chinese history forever. Wu quickly became pregnant and gave birth to a son, which elevated her status in the court. But she wasn't content with just being another imperial consort. She had her eyes on a much bigger prize: becoming empress. There was just one problem. Emperor Gaozong already had an empress, Wang, and a favored consort, Xiao. Both women were from powerful noble families and had strong political backing. Wu was still seen as an outsider, a merchant's daughter who didn't belong in their world. This is where Wu's ruthless nature truly began to show. She started a careful campaign to destroy both women, using methods that were as brilliant as they were brutal. First, she played them against each other. She would whisper secrets to Empress Wang about consort Xiao's plans. Then she would do the same in reverse, creating suspicion and paranoia between the two rivals. While they were busy fighting each other, Wu was quietly building her own network of supporters. She identified ambitious court officials who felt overlooked by the current power structure. She promised them positions and influence if they supported her rise. But Wu's most shocking move was yet to come. In 654 AD, she gave birth to a daughter. Historical records suggest that this baby girl was healthy and beautiful. But then, something terrible happened. The infant was found dead in her crib shortly after Empress Wang had visited Wu's chambers. Wu immediately accused the Empress of murdering her child out of jealousy. Now here's where the story gets controversial. Many historians believe that Wu actually killed her own baby daughter and blamed it on the Empress. This might sound impossible to believe, but you have to understand Wu's mindset. She saw this as a strategic sacrifice that would eliminate her biggest rival and secure power for her surviving children. Whether or not Wu actually committed this horrific act, her accusation worked perfectly. Emperor Gaozong was devastated by the baby's death and furious with Empress Wang. Wu had successfully turned the emperor against both of her rivals. In 655 AD, Both Empress Wang and Consort Xiao were stripped of their titles and thrown into prison. Wu Zetian became the new Empress of China, but her revenge wasn't complete yet. She ordered that both of her former rivals be brutally tortured. According to historical accounts, she had their hands and feet cut off and threw them into wine vats to drown. When Consort Xiao cursed Wu with her dying breath, Wu was so enraged that she ordered the woman's family name to be changed to something humiliating. This level of cruelty shocked even the hardened court officials of the time, but Wu was just getting started. Now that she was Empress, she began systematically eliminating anyone who posed a threat to her power. She created an extensive spy network throughout the empire. Anyone could report suspicious behavior to her agents, and rewards were given for information that led to arrests. This created a climate of fear where people were afraid to speak freely, even in their own homes. Wu also established what historians call revolutionary tribunals. These were special courts where political enemies were tried and usually executed. The trials were often based on forced confessions obtained through torture. It's estimated that thousands of people died during Wu's purges, including many members of the imperial family. But here's what makes Wu's story so complex. While she was eliminating her enemies, she was also proving to be an extremely capable ruler. She implemented policies that improved the lives of ordinary Chinese people. She expanded the civil service examination system, which allowed people from humble backgrounds to enter government based on merit rather than family connections. She promoted religious tolerance and supported both Buddhism and Taoism. Under her influence, the Chinese economy grew stronger and the empire's borders expanded. However, Wu's relationship with Emperor Gaozong was becoming increasingly strained. As the years passed, it became clear that she was the real power behind the throne. She attended all state meetings, made final decisions on important policies, and controlled access to the emperor. Gaozong had essentially become a puppet ruler in his own empire. In 660 AD, the emperor suffered what appears to have been a stroke. This gave Wu the perfect opportunity to take even more control. She began issuing orders in the emperor's name and handling all state business herself. When Gaozong died in 683 AD, Wu faced another critical moment. According to law, her son Li Xian should have become emperor. Wu did allow him to take the throne as Emperor Zhongzong, but she made it clear that she would continue to hold the real power as Empress Dowager. Her son, however, had different ideas. He began trying to assert his independence and make decisions without his mother's approval. This was a mistake that would cost him dearly. Wu had not spent decades fighting for power, only to hand it over to a son who wouldn't obey her. After just 55 days as emperor, she had him deposed and exiled. She then placed her younger son, Li Dan, on the throne as Emperor Ruizong. But this son proved to be even more problematic than the first. He also tried to rule independently and make decisions that went against Wu's wishes. So in 690 AD, Wu made a decision that shocked the entire Chinese world. She deposed her second son as well and declared herself emperor. Not empress, but emperor, a title that had never been held by a woman in Chinese history. She changed her name to Wu Zetian, which means heaven's will, claiming that she had divine approval to rule. She also declared the start of a new dynasty, the Zhou Dynasty, replacing the Tang Dynasty that had ruled for decades. This was an incredibly bold move that went against thousands of years of Chinese tradition and law. But Wu had prepared carefully for this moment. She had eliminated most of her enemies, built strong support among military leaders, and convinced many people that she was a better ruler than any man. To justify her unprecedented claim to power, Wu commissioned scholars to find historical precedents for female rulers. She promoted the idea that the legendary Yellow Emperor, one of the founders of Chinese civilization, had actually been a woman. She also used religious imagery, claiming to be the reincarnation of Maitreya Buddha. Wu's reign as emperor lasted for 15 years, from 690 to 705 AD. During this time, she continued her ruthless elimination of enemies while also implementing progressive policies. She was the first ruler in Chinese history to allow women to inherit property from their fathers. She established schools for girls and appointed women to important government positions. She also created a system where farmers could report corrupt local officials directly to the central government. But Wu's paranoia and cruelty never diminished. She continued to order executions based on the slightest suspicion of disloyalty. She had several of her own relatives killed when they opposed her policies. Even her lovers weren't safe from her wrath if they disappointed her. Yes, Wu had male lovers throughout her reign, which was another scandal that shocked traditional Chinese society. She was already breaking every rule by ruling as emperor, so she apparently decided to break the rules about imperial relationships as well. Some of these relationships were clearly political, designed to secure loyalty from powerful families. Others seemed to be purely personal, which showed that Wu was determined to live exactly as she pleased, regardless of what anyone thought. As Wu aged, however, her grip on power began to weaken. Court officials who had supported her out of fear began to quietly organize against her. Her sons, who had been waiting in exile, started building their own networks of supporters. In 705 AD, when Wu was 82 years old and suffering from illness, a group of court officials staged a palace coup. They forced her to give up the throne and restored her son Li Xian as Emperor Zhongzong. Wu died later that same year, bringing an end to one of the most remarkable and terrifying reigns in Chinese history. But her story doesn't end with her death. The legacy of Wu Zetian remains deeply controversial even today. Some historians praise her as a capable administrator who brought prosperity to China and advanced women's rights by centuries. Others condemn her as a murderous tyrant who killed thousands of innocent people to satisfy her hunger for power. The truth, as often happens with historical figures, is probably somewhere in between. Wu Zetian was undoubtedly a brilliant political strategist who overcame incredible obstacles to achieve unprecedented power. She proved that a woman could rule an empire as effectively as any man, but she was also willing to use extreme violence and cruelty to achieve her goals. She destroyed families, ended countless lives, and created a climate of fear that lasted for decades. What makes Wu's story so fascinating is how it challenges our ideas about power, gender, and morality. In a world where women had almost no rights, she created her own rules and lived by them completely. She refused to be limited by tradition or law, and she paid the price in terms of how history remembers her. But she also achieved something that no other woman in Chinese history has ever accomplished. She held absolute power in the world's largest empire. Modern Chinese people have complicated feelings about Wu Zetian. The communist government has sometimes praised her as an early feminist who fought against patriarchal oppression. At other times, they've criticized her as the example of how absolute power corrupts absolutely. Television shows and movies about Wu continue to be popular, though they often romanticize her story and downplay the more brutal aspects of her reign. What's clear is that Wu Zetian was one of the most remarkable people who ever lived. Love her or hate her, you cannot ignore the incredible impact she had on Chinese history and the precedent she set for women in positions of power. So there you have it, the complete story of Wu Zetian, the only woman to ever rule China as emperor. From a merchant's daughter to the most powerful person in the world, her journey was filled with brilliant strategies and brutal choices. She proved that in the game of power, gender meant nothing if you were smart enough, ruthless enough, and determined enough to take what you wanted. But her story also raises difficult questions about the price of power and whether achieving great things can justify terrible actions. What do you think about Wu Zetian? Was she a groundbreaking feminist leader who deserves our admiration? Or was she a cruel tyrant whose methods were too extreme to celebrate? Leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed learning about this fascinating historical figure, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories from history. And if you want to dive deeper into the world of ancient China, check out the video I'll link in the description about the Forbidden City and its secrets. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore another incredible story from the past.